Good evening, dear SPIL members, dear ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Lustrum committee, I would like to welcome you again back in these lecture halls. We are, first off, really grateful for the university to allow us to organize this event in a physical fashion. And I believe, if I speak on behalf of the Lustrum committee and the SPIL board, that we are very glad to see your faces again. First, before I introduce, of course, our speaker and our moderator, a couple of practical announcements. I see that everybody got a seat at a meter and a half distance, so that is great. Please stay seated during the lecture. And at the end of the lecture, when you stand up, please wear your face mask again. When you're seated or when you're speaking, it's allowed to take it off. The evening will unfold in, we will have a lecture by around 20 minutes, and afterwards we will have a moderated discussion, conversation with both questions from live stream viewers at home, as well as in this room. You can just raise your hand and Mr. Brinkel will give you your chance to ask the question. Josephine, our chair of the Lustrum committee, will be at the end of this table with her laptop, or over there? I will be. Okay, and she will monitor the questions that come in from live stream viewers. So everybody watching at home, also welcome. The discussion will be moderated, and then after at around 9 we will wrap up. And I would like to ask you to stay seated, because we will announce some exciting news as well, because this is not just the DS lecture that we do yearly, but this is also the kickoff of a strange but also hopefully wonderful Lustrum year, marking the 40th anniversary of the Study Association. So I would like to ask you to stay seated once the lecture is done, and then our guests can leave first, and please stay seated until further notice. And that leaves me to our moderator for this evening and for the conversation will be Theo Brinkel. He's right here. He's a professor by special appointment at this university, at the Institute of Political Science, in military and societal studies. And that leads me, of course, to our main speaker for this evening. With an extensive career at the Netherlands Navy, the Royal Netherlands Navy, is now the senior advisor to our Minister of Defense, also responsible for the preparation and execution of military operations, and recently elected as the chairman of the NATO Military Committee. Please give it up for our Chief of Defense, Rob Bauer.
Well, hopefully technology will help. There we go. Stay with me. There we are. Well, good evening all. Thank you very much for inviting me. And I understand this is a very special event because this is the first time in a long time that you can gather physically. Here you see me with the Minister of Defense dancing during the Vienna Ball in, what was it, February, I think. It's not my wife, this is the Minister of Defense. And thanks for whoever brought me this, so this is good. Good evening. Who is it? Thank you very much. Good evening to all of you. Let me first congratulate you with your 8th Lustrum, and of course for, as I said earlier, for inviting me. I'm happy with this chance to talk to future politicians and members of public administration. And it's always my mission to tell as much people as possible about the armed forces. And it can be a closed-off world for civilians. So I'm going to make you a little bit more of an insider to this world, my world. And I've got a sort of call of arms to you, students of political science. But I'll get to that later. First, I'll try to take you into the world of servicemen and servicewomen. Some of you may have seen the recent TV program Kamp van Koningsbrugge. Who saw that program? Only a handful. This is a series in which civilians attempt to complete the selection for one of the toughest military trainings in the Netherlands, the Army Special Forces training. And do you know the saying, when the going gets tough, the tough gets going? Some of the toughest are in the Special Forces. And these men are asked to perform extreme tasks under extreme situations. Therefore, they're trained to the core, have perfected their skills to the bone. They're extremely fit, disciplined, resourceful, and focused. So what happens when civilians try to do the Army Special Forces training? Some of them had an excellent basic fitness, exercised regularly, had some good muscle on them, and a good physical condition. But they quickly discovered that the Special Forces are not just about physical strength. It's their mental strength that makes the difference. Without a strong mind, it's just a nice-looking collection of meat and muscles, which you, by the way, can buy in the form of the 2021 Netherlands Marine Corps calendar, €16.50 a piece, and the proceeds go to a charity. Now, a strong mind is what will determine whether or not you will crack under pressure. That's what will make you keep going when most people give up. It's what will save not only your bodies in times of crisis, but it will also save yourself. It's all about resilience. Can you bounce back when the going gets really, really tough? When I think about strength and resilience, I do not only think of the Special Forces. I also think of my dear mother. She's 91 years old, lives on her own, and still drives her car. When COVID-19 came into our lives, including the first protective measures, I called her because I was worried about her well-being. Did she have enough supplies, groceries and such? As you can remember, toilet paper was an issue at the time. And I quickly found out I did not have to be worried at all. She was so calm and collected. Had gone to the supermarket every morning at 7:55 a.m. and was done at 8:30 a.m. She'd been scheduled for hip surgery, and to prevent her operation from being pushed back endlessly, she'd written a letter to her surgeon. I asked her, "Why did you do that?" And she said, "So he won't forget me," she said. Kind of silly that I was worried about my mother's well-being. She's lived through bigger challenges. She was 11 years old when World War II began, and 16 when it ended. She had missed out on a big part of her teenage years of the Nazi occupation, because of the Nazi occupation of our country. She lost 2 husbands. One when she was 32, my biological father, 6 months before I was born, and one when she was 78, when my stepfather died. But none of this has made her bitter or angry. She never blamed others but always talked about her own responsibility to pick up her life again and move forward. It made her resilient, self-reliant. It's the resilience that sometimes misses in generations much younger than hers. I've been surprised and astonished by people who refuse to wear a mask during the COVID times and draw parallels to Nazi occupation during the Second World War. From my office in the Ministry of Defense, I can see the square in front of our parliament. The Ministry of Defense is the Plein number 4. It's one of the old buildings around the square in the center of The Hague. And I've seen COVID deniers march on that square, refusing to wear a mask. I've seen them attack police and stalk members of parliament, shouting death threats. A news outlet had to remove their logo from satellite vans because they were threatened. Some of these people gleefully speculate over killing the Prime Minister and laugh when they see that he no longer can take his bike to work but has to be escorted. I'm very worried about this development. This is not a case of anti-establishment people with a different opinion. This is not a case of tinfoil hats and a colorful homemade website with pictures of crop circles. These are people who are willing to disrupt the world violently. They spread theories of disinformation and division, sometimes unknowingly filled with Russian conspiracy theories like accidental Trojan horses. I'm concerned about this because I see they are treating people who do not share their opinions as their enemies. There's no room for anyone who disagrees with them. They put their own interest above common interest. This can tear the fabric of our society. Now let me explain my concern from the perspective of teamwork in the military. In the military, we put common interest above the individual. Being strong is not always about being the fastest alone, but about making sure the group reaches its goal. Because whether you survive or not in times of war or conflict is dependent on the group you are in. When you are wounded, your colleagues will do everything to take you with them. Leave no man behind. That sense of unity, of fighting for each other, is strong. It's what people love most about serving in the military. It's what they miss most when they retire or leave. This is why we in the military speak of a band of brothers and sisters. Every man and woman in the team has a specific role, and together they form a solid team. The American General George Patton, who served during both the First and the Second World War, described it aptly in a speech he gave multiple times to his troops in 1944 before the liberation of Europe. And I have redacted the quote a little bit, as the general was famous for his profanity. Every man does his job, I quote, serves the whole. Ordnance men are needed to supply the guns and machinery of war to keep us rolling. Quartermasters are needed to bring up food and clothes. Every last man has a job to do, even the one who heats our water. General Patton explains that a team depends on solid and trusted members. When a platoon, a squad, or a brigade feels that there are cracks in this unity, there is a sense of real danger. We survive as a team, or we die as a team. Patton described this as follows, and I quote, "Every single man in this army has a job to do, and he must do it. Every man is a vital link in a great chain. What if every truck driver suddenly decided that he didn't like the whine of those shells overhead, turned yellow, and jumped headlong into a ditch? The coward could say, hell, they don't miss me, just one man in thousands. But what if every man thought that way? Where in the hell would we be now? What would our country, our loved ones, our homes be like? End of quote. I ask myself these questions too. When I look at our society now, I see too many people who are jumping headlong into a ditch. When the going gets tough, it can be attractive to hear someone say that it doesn't have to be this tough, that you as an individual bear no responsibility in this crisis, and that others are to blame. And so in every crisis we see discrimination rise. In the case of this COVID crisis, there has been the talk of a China crisis. And there is even a rise in anti-Semitism. In every crisis, conspiracy theories can gain foothold. They are a way out of what is necessary to overcome a crisis. Hard work, shared responsibility, and sacrifice. And most importantly, a sense of community, a sense of we can do this together. We can do this as a team. I'm worried when I see members of our society are jumping into a ditch. One of these people asked me recently, after sending a lengthy and muddy plea, who do you serve? He was afraid, as conspiracy theorists sometimes are, that the fence is the pawn of a tyrannical and illegal government. And I've seen these ideas before. But the number has risen over the last 2 years. When Defense was asked to keep the situation safe during a farmers' protest, it was said by some that we were against farmers. Of course we weren't. We were asked by the mayor of The Hague to prevent the disturbance of public order, protect the roads, and destruction of property. When there was a big field exercise by the army a few weeks ago, in which the public saw combat vehicles driving by, some said on social media that it was to prepare for a lockdown. Of course it wasn't. Our military personnel is training constantly, sometimes in ways that are more visible to our civil society. Defense does its best to quickly debunk these fables. But these are not cases of harmless gossip. They are misinforming and an insult to the military. People join the military for many reasons. A desire for adventure, the need for a challenge, or wanting to help people. But there's one common denominator, and that is a love for our country. So I find it worrisome when people call our service into question. Now let me answer that question posed to me by a conspiracy theorist. Who do you serve? I serve the armed forces. And the armed forces serve the Kingdom of the Netherlands. So in other words, I serve my nation. Every soldier has taken the oath or has promised the following 3 things. Loyalty to our king, meaning the government. Obedience to our constitution and other laws. And last but not least, submission to disciplinary law. And so have I in 1985. The armed forces will protect anyone in our kingdom. Anyone, regardless of their faith, political preference, age, skin color, gender, sexual preference, and so forth, and so forth. We go where we are asked to go by the government. And any mission abroad is decided upon by our government. A government which is formed after legal elections and an agreed outcome, which is still a bit of an issue across the pond at the moment. Parliament has and is always informed and asked to support these missions, with the exception of special operations and NATO Article 5 missions. The last because time is of the utmost essence and there's no time for a debate if you are attacked. Currently, there are about 450 Dutch servicemen and women deployed to, amongst others, Afghanistan, Iraq, Mali, Libya, Israel, Jordan, and Lithuania. None of these soldiers are serving abroad for egoistic purposes, nor the ones who serve at home. Think of the servicemen and women who have stepped up in this COVID crisis, from helping out in hospitals to setting up and manning test lanes. These men and women are in the armed forces because they believe in something that is bigger than themselves: freedom. Freedom to be who you want to be. Freedom of speech and freedom to vote. They live not just for themselves, but for their country and for the freedom in the countries to which they are asked to go. Their service is a powerful instrument that our government can use when it deems necessary. So it hurts when people question the motive of military personnel. Not only in this case, but also by politicians who should know better. Last year, a member of parliament called the work of our F-16 pilots during operations over Iraq murder. This year, the youth division of a political party called the armed forces the killing machine of defense. Thankfully, these instances are rare, but they are still hurtful. Still, I and all my colleagues in the military fight, if necessary, until death to protect the freedom of speech of all Dutch citizens, also theirs. I only ask that they will inform themselves. Our men and women in uniform act in accordance to a mandate that is given to them by the legislator. They act according to international law. They go where they are asked to go. A deterrence exercise in Lithuania, gender advice in Afghanistan, COVID assistance in our own country, arresting the suspected perpetrator after the terrorist attacks in Utrecht, emergency assistance following a hurricane in the Bahamas, and so on and so on. And they do this voluntarily. They joined the armed forces at their own volition. Centuries ago, the protection of our cities, of our country, was a shared responsibility. Almost everyone contributed to the safeguarding of their own town or village. Now, we've got over 40,000 professionals who have taken this safeguarding upon them for our whole country. Critics can foul-mouth the armed forces all they want. All I ask is that they inform themselves. The existence and usage of the armed forces is defined in our constitutions, Article 97 to 100. If you want to change the purpose of or the way the armed forces operate, change our constitution. If you want to disband our armed forces, make sure you have a two-thirds majority in both houses of parliament, and I will take off my uniform and change into civilian clothes. I will be sad, because mostly I will not agree for the reason, because the threat is still the threat, but I'll follow the law. As will the other 42,852 servicemen and servicewomen. So I ask critics to take the constitutional route if they don't like how it is now. Organize a civilized debate. And in the meantime, I hope critics are respectful to our military, which consist of people who voluntarily join to serve and protect their country, its people, and freedom and peace worldwide. Because a polarized discussion only makes for a more divided society. And that's what our enemies like to see. Enemies hate a resilient society. Our enemies hate strong alliances, such as NATO. The best way to annoy your enemy is to show that you are strong, resilient, and that you are not alone. Next year, I will become the chairman of the NATO's military committee. I will do everything to keep annoying our enemies by maintaining the strong bond of our transatlantic allies. As a small country in the middle of NATO territory, the Netherlands has enjoyed a feeling of peace and security for decades. And although that is great in itself, I think it also has led to a misinformed image of the actual threat in Europe. We haven't paid the 2% contribution to NATO, despite repeated promises to do so since 2014 by our Prime Minister. Some say that the 2% means nothing, that it is only a percentage. That, however, is not true. The 2% of our gross domestic product, the GDP, is the amount of money that is required to form an armed forces that is able to counter the threats against our nation and in general the alliance, if you look at all the 30 nations, the 30 NATO members. Through the fog of peace, it didn't seem urgent. I hope that the future politicians amongst you will recognize that urgency, and as it is up to the government and parliament to pay the 2%, it's a political decision how much you spend on defense. We've advised a long-term political commitment to the EU and NATO in our defense vision for 2035. Because we can't afford to rely on our biggest NATO ally, the United States, to keep footing 70% of the total bill within NATO. The President-elect of the United States, Joe Biden, is said to have a bigger focus on Asia than on Europe, continuing the Asia pivot of the Obama administration. He will also keep calling us to contribute more to NATO, though in a different tone, most likely, than the current president. Also, we've seen that Russia and China have been increasing their defense budgets by billions of dollars. And we've seen that they have increased their information operations. They are arming themselves not only with warships and hypersonic missiles, but also with tools to attack the cohesion of a society, our society. And that is what I need your help with. Let me explain. There's a quote by military strategist John R. Boyd that summarizes this threat. Machines don't fight wars. Terrain doesn't fight wars. Humans fight wars. You must get into the mind of the humans. That's where the battles are won. There's a right way to do this. For example, in the UN mission in Mali, we researched the Malian population to understand what kind of people they are, what their needs are, and how we can support them. In the Baltic states, we researched what safety means for that population, to serve them better in the NATO deployment enhanced forward presence. This kind of research is legitimate, and it supports the effort of our military personnel. What I'm worried about is the illegitimate mind battles. Conflicts of today are more and more about influencing what people think, about what they see as true and valuable. A few examples. On the 17th of July, Russian separatists and I'm talking about 2014, Russian separatists in the Ukraine shot down flight MH17, killing 298 people, of whom 193 Dutch. To this day, Russia is denying involvement and actively spreading disinformation. In April of this year, a forged letter by NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg was sent to the governments and media outlets in Lithuania. It stated that the organization was withdrawing its troops from the country. Some outlets published the story. 3. A French media outlet has falsely claimed that the NATO exercise called Defender 2020 was the cause of the spread of COVID in Europe. The website has ties to Inforos, a news agency that has been linked to the Russian military intelligence. These instances of disinformation are attempts to test our nation's resilience. Just as Russian fighter jets regularly attempt to fly into Dutch airspace, trying to test the speed of our response. We've even seen Russian bombers in our airspace in 2018. But notice that with fake stories, they don't attack us physically. They attack our ideas of what is true and valuable, wanting to create confusion and division, and aiming to destroy the roots of our democracy. Of course, disinformation has been used before. It's of all times, by the Soviet Union, for example, but also by the Allied forces during World War II. The difference is that now some of the social media that spread these stories operate without checks and balances. Social media will refer you from one conspiracy theory to the next, as long as you will keep looking, keep clicking. Mostly for their financial gain, because juicy stories that alert you of imminent danger are being clicked upon more often than the dull and well-researched truth. Some steps have been taken, for example, to alert the public to false statements on Twitter. Instagram has, during this pandemic, added a button under COVID-related posts that will lead you to reliable information. And recently, YouTube has taken down the page of a well-known conspiracy theorist, a rapper, by the way. I don't know if that is the best solution, because the real problem seems to be that the profit model of social media platforms is to make you keep looking and clicking whatever kind of information you are digesting. As future politicians and members of public administration, these will be some of your biggest challenges. Understanding the power of social media platforms and deciding whether to regulate them, and if so, how to do this. Making algorithms work for us instead of against us. Making people more resilient to clickable disinformation. So many people think they are using a certain medium to investigate the truth, not knowing their investigation is shaped by that medium, not knowing that this medium profits from your investigation. I remember a disturbing headline from last year. Facebook is putting a halt to Russian influence of Africa. The company had removed tens of fake accounts and pages which were targeted to 1 million people living in 8 African nations such as Libya and Sudan. And these accounts were focused on influencing the opinions of civilians in these countries. They were controlled by organizations owned by a Russian businessman with close ties to the president of Russia. A man who had previously been indicted by the US for interfering in the 2016 presidential election. Let that sink in. 1. A social media platform is seen as being able to influence whole countries. 2. Opinions are worth that much. Bending opinions toward the goal of a state are a scary tactic. So in these times, having and keeping a clear and critical mind is more important than ever. A clear mind untainted by ill-willing parties. A resilient mind able to recognize disinformation. So this is my so-called call to arms to you, bright minds who are going to shape the politics of the future. I want to ask you, as the leaders, politicians and directors of the future, build and maintain the resilience of our society. To be a leader who unifies, not someone who adds to and widens the divide. Be critical of the information that feeds your sense of reality. As military theorist Karl von Clausewitz once said, our mind must be constantly armed. I agree. Protect your mind from disinformation. Ask yourself, in whose interest is it to create confusion, to create division? And whether you want to add to it or be an advocate of unity. I hope you can take inspiration from teamwork in the military and realize that you are part of something bigger. This room, this student organization, this city, this country, this idea of freedom and democracy. As General Patton said, every man is a vital link in a great chain. You are one of those chains, one of those links, and you can contribute to a strong chain. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Admiral, for your very, very inspiring words. And I think that at Leiden University they are on fertile soil because, as you may know, the university was founded in 1575 as a reward for the town of Leiden that had been under siege from the Spanish forces during our War of Independence. And the people of Leiden were starving. They were begging the mayor for surrender to the Spanish forces. And the mayor said, we are not going to surrender. If you are hungry, you better eat me instead of surrendering.
Did they?
And they did, of course, not, because otherwise we wouldn't have been here. But resilience was already at the founding moment of this university. So thank you very much for introducing this essential theme to us. I would like to invite you, because I'm sure that there will be many questions among you, to have your questions to the Admiral about what he has said, or maybe about what you think or want to know about defense in general. So if you have any questions, please can you stand up, give us your name, and pose your question, and it will be answered directly. This also holds for the people at home, looking at the stream. They can, I think, type in their questions. They will be collected, and every once in a while I will ask for the questions of the people that follow us on YouTube.
Okay.
So thanks very much. Please.
Yes, my name is Rob. I think as speaker on behalf of the whole group, I would say thank you for the very inspiring speech. I was wondering if now the idea of the European Security Council from two just political parties, and I was wondering what your opinion about it is. Do you think it's a good idea or not? Thank you.
Well, first of all, the answer is more a political answer than a military issue. I mean, it might help in terms of the ability to agree on security issues. one of the problems, of course, still in Europe is that we are not a, I mean, the whole debate on a European army, for example. By the way, there isn't a NATO army either, but I think at the moment people see security as a very important issue in Europe. It's one of the few issues where people are not very critical about in terms of the European Union. So Europe has, the EU has changed its direction towards also security and safety issues. But it is still difficult because it is still 27 or 28 nation states that all have their own parliament and their own priorities and their own interests. And it is not like one body. Europe is not one nation. And so it will be difficult to have a common view on this particular thing. People will not accept at the moment, I would say, that Brussels decides on the deployment of forces to a mission. That will still have to be the capitals of the nations where the soldiers come from. So, but it might be a good thing for, it might help to focus on certain security issues if the nations come together in such a security council. But of course, whether it happens is primarily a political debate.
Okay, thank you.
Question, yes, please.
I'm Niels. I was wondering, in the beginning of your talk, you said that the army will always protect all Dutch citizens, regardless of their race, their religion, the color of their skin, but also that you always act on behalf of the elected politicians of the government. What if those two would at one point go against each other? What if we have a government that tells the military to act against certain groups of our population because of their religion, for example? How would military react to that? Because I can't imagine actually accepting such a directive. But what would the response be?
What is the right word for a rechtsstaat?
Rule of law?
What is the word for a rechtsstaat? Come on. Okay, then I'll use the Dutch word. There's two things that are very important in this case. I would say there is democracy and there is the rechtsstaat. And it means for me that both needs to be aligned. So if there is a majority of idiots that want to do something that is against the rechtsstaat, I will not deploy the forces when I'm ordered to do that. Because the two things should be aligned. So a politician that has the majority to do something against the law is something the military will not do. I think that is the basic answer to your question.
Thanks. Anybody from here? Yes, and then we will go to the questions that are streamed. Yes, please.
Yeah, it's to continue with the question before. People, it's also the people that change the laws, right?
Yeah.
So if there's a majority of idiots that change the law, and the law becomes something against the values of not going against based on religion or skin color, how does it work from that?
I think that happened in Germany in the 1930s. And that's a very scary situation. And then it comes to my own conscience and the conscience of the military men and women in the armed forces to say, I will leave the force. I will, because I know I don't want to be part of that system. But if that happens in a country, and it's not a process of 2 days, it is a process of years where slowly, like in Germany, the late 20s, early 30s, then it began slowly until it sort of at a high was the Second World War, but it is a creepy thing if you think about it, where we start telling each other things that are against the law, and suddenly there is a majority, or even a two-third majority, where you can change the Constitution, where it says we have equal rights. We are all the same, not the same in terms of character, etc., but we have similar rights. All have the same rights in the nation, in our country. If a nation starts to change those laws, like unfortunately we see in Europe, in certain nations there is scary things going on. So it is something I'm concerned about. And the funny thing is, we are all blaming politics for the fact that it is so divided, but we vote. You vote. And if there is, like, in the next election, one party with 30 plus votes or seats, one party with 20 plus seats, and then 5 or 6 parties with 15 seats in Parliament, then we will need 5 parties to form a government. And it doesn't make it easier. It's not the politicians to blame, it is us, the people who vote. So people have to think about how they vote. I won't say to you on which party you have to vote, but you have to think about not only what is the party that is interesting to you, but if you want to rule a nation, if you want to do something for a nation, you have to have an effective government as well.
Thanks. Some questions, maybe. Is that a follow-on question on this issue that we have here? No, let's have questions from people at home. You have one?
From the live stream from Ingrid, and she asks, how can we as civilians contribute to your work and mission?
Wow, that's good. That's a good question. Don't ask what the nation can do for you, but what you can do for the nation. John F. Kennedy. But I think it is very good. I think there is several things you can do. I think there is a interesting program ongoing which is called Defensity College at the moment. I don't know, has anyone heard about it? It's a program for students that can work in the Ministry of Defense, and you can work either in the ministry itself or with the Navy, Air Force, Army, Marechaussee, or the Defense Materiel Organization. And you can gain some experience in that organization, and you will learn something about defense. An interesting thing about it is that people who come for interviews in the beginning of that program, they don't know much about defense, but about 80% of them want to work for us after they almost leave the program. I think it's maximum of 2 years. I don't know exactly. Where's Mike? Is it 2 years?
I think so, yes.
Yeah. So after 2 years, you leave, but it's an opportunity. If you're interested in defense, you can try to join that program and see if you like it. And at the same time, it's a good experience if you don't work for us later on. But it's also an opportunity to gain some experience. So that, I think, for students is a very interesting opportunity. And of course, you can join the reserves. That is another possibility. And that you can do with a life that is actually sort of parallel to defense, but you join the reserve, then participate in training and exercises for a number of days per year, and then that's also an opportunity. Or join defense, that's also an opportunity.
Thank you. Shall we go to you first, and then to that corner? Yes.
Hi, my name is Ed. Well, you just said that we're joining defense. What made you decide?
Well, it's not a very beautiful story. It's a story of a young man of 18 or 17 when I was in the 5th grade of Atheneum, and I thought about what I would do, and after I passed the exams, and so my stepfather bumped into a friend from his high school, and at a reunion, and that was a naval officer who had just retired, and he and his wife came to our house for staying with us for a weekend, and he talked about the Navy, and he said, is dat wat voor jou, jongen? Weet ik niet, meneer, weet je wel, like this. And so I thought, well, it might be interesting. So he sent me some information, and I thought, well, it's an interesting education, the Naval Academy in Den Helder, officers training, and but I also applied for economics in Groningen, and I applied for the Technical University in Delft. And I thought, one of the three probably will say that I can come, and the other two will say that I can't come. And then it became June or July, and all three said that I could come. And I still had to choose. And then I thought, well, it's actually interesting because the first 3 years was studying, then 1.5 years of practice at sea, and then going back to study again for 2 years. So I thought in study time it's the same, but there's a break with work, and I thought that's a good combination. That's why I joined.
Thanks. Over there, question. Yes, please.
My name is Sura, and I was wondering, you talked a lot about conspiracy theories, and I was wondering if you have any ideas on how to stop those ideas from spreading, and if NATO should or can have any role.
It's interesting, there's a sort of a parallel with COVID at the moment. There's now a debate on whether we should focus all our energy on trying to get rid of COVID, or whether we should focus on getting used to the fact that it is there and organize our lives around it. And I think there's a parallel. There's a parallel here with your question. I don't think it will be very successful if you try to stop disinformation being spread. I mean, the internet is what it is. It was a fantastic platform, and everybody thought that it was the ideal form for democracy because everyone could reach the truth. Everyone could reach whatever information there was on Earth, and nobody could stop it because of all the nodes in the network. But then, and I think in the beginning, Facebook was like in the Arab Spring, Facebook was used for good purposes. But then Facebook found out, hey, that's interesting. If they used it that way, we can use it the other way around to make sure that advertisements reach people. So they started to use it to influence people more than to inform people. And so I think we need a debate with the platforms, with the big tech companies, because they have so much influence and so much power in all of our lives. I mean, Google knows all of you. They know where you have been today. They know what your questions were today because you searched the internet. It's the biggest intelligence company in the world, Google. Bigger than any intelligence company or any intelligence organization of the government. And so I think we need to have a debate about their responsibility that they have to society. There's more than earning money. There's more than just making sure they get rich. because misinforming people is a danger. There is a responsibility to the nations where they earn their money. And I don't think that debate is, well, it is starting a little bit now. And then everybody sees the fact that Twitter does this to Donald Trump. But I guess it's only Donald Trump they do this with. I don't think they do it with all their customers. So actually, if they only do it to Donald Trump, I don't think that is the right way to go. And so you either do it right and do it with all, or you not do it. So if YouTube kicks out this conspiracy theorist, what is his name? Lange Frans, Long France. Then I think that is wrong, because then you actually, it's not. Then you attack the free speech of Lange Frans, only Lange Frans, and that's not right. And I don't think Arjen Lubach meant that when he made his program of Fabeltjesfuik. But I think, so one side is you can't stop the disinformation being spread, but you can teach people how to deal with information which will include disinformation. So we have to teach young people and older people to find their way in the huge mountain of information which will contain disinformation. But now, as Lubach has shown, within 3 clicks after asking a question about a vaccine against COVID-19, he was in a conspiracy. There were only conspiracy things he could choose from on the right side of the screen in 3 clicks. Well, that's ridiculous. So people actually think they found the truth, but they didn't. They were led in a way so that Facebook can earn the most money. So we have to it's about the resilience where we have to find the answer, I think. Not in stopping the disinformation or information, it's there.
Anybody from that side? Question there?
Behind the cameraman, there's...
Okay, yeah, please, for you.
Hello, my name is Peter Dalen. My own father has served under your command in the late 80s.
I know your father, Peter.
Yes.
Yes.
And
I was informed on Facebook that you were going to be here tonight.
yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Baksmaat of Fair Wind 88. And often at the kitchen table when the conversation is about good leadership and good party, your name comes across. What is the biggest lesson you give us, as you say, the leaders of the future, about leadership?
Wow. I think one of the important things in general is authenticity. I think you shouldn't try to be someone. You are who you are. You can change things. You can change your behavior. But if you try to act a role, if you're going to play a role, and the pressure goes up, as in my job sometimes happens, then all the things that I play will fall away. So what actually remains is Rob, is who I am. And you should be focusing your actions and the way you try to achieve things around that, around yourself. So don't try to be someone else. I mean, in the present day and age, it is difficult because you all, as my 3 children, they all are the whole day on the mobile phone and the what is it? You have the different Snap chat, or you have the other thing with all the photographs the whole day, Instagram. And actually, in the end, if you're not careful, you want to be someone that is passing on your screen. You forget about who you can be. You should try to be someone else. So I think when it comes to leadership, stay close to who you are. That is very important. Secondly, be honest. I mean, people will follow someone they believe more than someone that is bullying them into believing something. So it is about honesty, and it is about a message that actually people think, yeah, I think he means what he says. And I think leadership is different from being a manager, for example. I mean, if you look at a crisis, which is sometimes the case in the military or in the police or in the medical world, there's a crisis, then command is actually the way to do things. You give orders, and that it has a function, because there's no time for a debate. So we need to save someone, or save your life, or save the life of someone else. And then command is the leadership style. And then there is problems that are actually happened before, and someone has written a book about it. And then if you read the book, and maybe 2 or 3 books from different professors, you actually know the way to solve those problems. And that's management, basically, because it is solving problems in a way that have been solved by others already. But if it comes to really difficult issues, where actually there have not been any solutions yet, I will talk to people with a question mark on my forehead. You know, I talk about the issue, and I say to the group, you know, you are much smarter than I am, so you better solve this problem, because it is the problem of us. It is our problem. Because I am the highest guy in the military in the Netherlands doesn't make me better necessarily in solving the problems. So I will reach out to you, and I will make sure that you understand that I don't know, actually. So vulnerability, in a way, is also something that I think is required in the modern leadership role. But these difficult issues then lead to not necessarily the solution, the answer. But if we agree to something, and I will say, okay, boys and girls, will you follow me on the route to a possible solution? Then the leader is the one that you will follow, because you believe that he has the answer. You believe he will come with an answer. That is different than that I know the answer. And I think that is the difference between a manager and a leader. People want to follow a leader. They believe him or her. And I think that those are ingredients of leadership, more than that I will say this is the answer. Because again, I'm the sort of leader that fits Rob Bauer. So I don't think there is a leadership style. I think there's also a leadership style that comes with a phase in an organization, a phase in the times, whether it is uncertain times, whether you need a strong leader or a more inward-looking leader, or a leader that is more asking questions and giving answers, and it all has to do with the circumstances as well. I wasn't born necessarily as the chief of defense, Thank God. I didn't know that I would reach this position. I just worked very hard. That's an ingredient to come far in life, but not all the people that work very hard become chief of defense in the military, So there is certain ingredients that will bring you there, but it's not necessarily the case that will bring you to that particular position. But there's also chance. There's luck. You have to be there in that particular spot when there's thought about, who's going to be the next chief of defense. Hey, there's Bauer. He's one of the candidates. So there's a lot of things that will, you don't have to be too stupid, of course, and you don't have to be, you have to have done your previous jobs in a good way. But it is also about if you're being given an opportunity in life, Did you grab it? Did you make something out of it? If you want to work 2 days a week, that's fine, but it will not bring you to this kind of position. It's a choice up to you, but if you want to reach the top, then you have to work hard. And then there is sacrifices. Do you want to, it's not an 8 to 5 job. And all those decisions that you make as an individual will either stop you from getting there, and don't think that this is ideal. This is not the best thing to do in life. I mean, there's also disadvantages in this job. Ask my wife and children. But because now with COVID they see me more than ever. But normally I'm away very often. So it has advantages, but there's also disadvantages, and it has to fit with you. It's a long answer to a simple question.
Do you have questions from?
Yes, I have another question also from Ingrid. She asks.
Is there one viewer?
No, we have more.
Oh.
The question is, as future, and future advisors, what would you say needs the most priority and more funding in the armed forces?
What is most needed in the armed forces?
What needs more funding in the armed forces? What do you think we or the government right now can do to make your job easier with funding?
Well, live up to the promises. I mean, the 2% is a promise. And, but of course, it is a debate about priorities. And people now say, it's interesting that when there was no money with an economic crisis, people were cutting the defense budget because, everybody has less money, so defense as well. And then we got an economic high. And then people said to me, do you know how much money that is, 2%? What is that for a strange reasoning? And now people say, well, you can't ask more money. I mean, we have COVID, and so it's now healthcare. And it's healthcare, and it's healthcare. It's healthcare. So we don't have money for defense now. But Sweden, interestingly enough, they have COVID as well. They have increased their budget with 40%. Australia has increased its budget of defense with 40%. So there can be other choices, but it's a political choice. They know what I ask for. I know what to do with the money if it comes. And it's in the Defense Vision 2035 that we've basically written what is necessary to be relevant, to remain relevant in 2035. So I meet senators from the US abroad, and they look angry at me, say, you have to pay your 2%. You're asking the wrong guy. I'm not deciding on the 2%. So it is a question of priorities. And as I said, the Netherlands is in a place which is far away, relatively far away from Russia, and it's relatively far away from the Mediterranean. So we're relatively safe. So who cares? We don't have to spend money on defense. But it is also, we are part of this club, which is called NATO. And if you're part of a football club, for example, or a soccer club, or a hockey club, or whatever you want to call the club you're a member of, they will ask you to do service behind the bar, or whistle during being a referee, or be trainer, or repair things, and people say, well, I don't have the time for that. I don't have time to, pour the coffee on Saturday morning. Okay, says the football club, that's fine, but then we will raise the contribution. Then we will raise the money you will spend as a member. No, we don't want that either. You can't have it both. If you want to be secure, you have to pay for it. Not only at the moment that there is a war, but you have to pay. It's an insurance, If you don't want to be insured, that's fine. But if you want to make sure that not only we help ourselves, but if something happens in NATO, others help us as well, then you need to pay your contribution. And that's what this is about.
We have time for one more question, and I see at least, shall we collect the questions?
I have time enough.
Yeah. So you and there's come ever more questions when we. I give the you were there, and you. So let's have three questions, and then you answer them afterwards, please.
My name is Jurgen. What I hear from your speech and your answers is that I think you're very politically engaged. Did you ever have, or do you still have, desires for a political career?
Thanks. Number 2, where were you? Yeah.
I believe I was wondering, when you talk with other armies from other countries, and you listen about the way to approach a certain issue, how do you solve your differences? And maybe it's a very different country. How do you cooperate with them in a specific situation?
Thanks. And the last one? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Nicola. I was wondering what the role of the military can be during Corona times, because as I understood, for example, like during the first wave, there's actually a military operation, it's like a military hospital set up, and well, that was, I think it was dismantled again after the first wave had like gone away, and then the second wave came. So like, what is the role of the military in this, and what role can it play in future or during like the third or fourth wave?
Thanks, please.
To start with your question, the answer is no. But it's interesting. I had an interesting discussion with a journalist about this, and he asked me the same question. And I said, no, because I mean, the way things are being done in Parliament is not my style. I don't think it is. I don't think I would fit in. And then he said, but if you disagree with that, you actually should participate in it so that you can change it. And yeah, of course he was right there, but no, the answer is no. I think as a professional, it is very difficult. I mean, in the political arena, there are deals. There's always deals about money and priorities and things, and so they will deal against each other things that are not connected at all. And one party wants this and the other party wants that, and they say, okay, if you get this a little bit more, then you get a little bit more of this, or the other way around. We have cuts in the budgets, then we cut this a little bit. And the debates are always like, if there's more money for defense and security in a coalition government, then for example, on the left side of the political spectrum, people say, okay, then we need to do more on education. And so if there's 75 million for defense, there has to be 75 million to education. They're not necessarily connected, but they are connected because of the coalition. So it's not about the content, it is about the dealing and wheeling. And I don't think I'm very good at that, if it's not intellectually connected. Your question was a broad one, actually. It was about international cooperation and how I would deal with people that are difficult to deal with. And I think the Netherlands has proven over the last 25 years that everything is possible when it comes to international cooperation. People say you actually cannot work together internationally because of the issue of sovereignty. So therefore you need to do everything yourself, because defense is about sovereignty, and therefore you can you can't do things with Germany or Belgium or, and actually we have. I mean, we safeguard our airspace in the last 4 or 5 years with Belgium. And so there is a treaty to actually arrange this, that if there is a hijacked airplane, civilian airplane, on its way to, let's say, Amsterdam, and we hear that the airplane will dive into the damn square with the passengers on board, as they did on 9/11 in the Twin Towers, then we will shoot down that airplane. Well, the shooting down is being done by defense, by an F-16 or an F-35 fighter aircraft, but it's not under my command then, it is under command of the Minister of Justice. He will give the order to shoot down the civilian airplane, but it's the military that does it. Now we have a treaty that there's a roster that either there's Dutch F-16s on duty or Belgian. Now, if this would happen in the Netherlands and there's 2 Belgian F-16 in the roster, the Belgian F-16s would leave their base, go into the Netherlands airspace, and then do what the Dutch Minister of Justice will tell them. And the other way around, if we are on the roster but an airplane will dive into Brussels, we will shoot that airplane for the Belgian Minister of Justice. And we have arranged it, so that is possible. We have integrated our navies with Belgium, we have integrated our brigades with Germany. Everything is possible. If you want to, it can be arranged. What I do believe, though, is that I think it is smarter to start with a small group of nations to arrange things, and if things are being arranged, allow others to join, but then in accordance with the rules of the small group. Because if you want to organize things together with 28, it's a mess. Nothing will happen. Because everybody wants to their bid. It's like a large coalition in government. It's very difficult. Because everyone wants to have their own interests in the arrangement. So, but we have examples of that as well. And so I think everything is possible. It is very important that the chiefs of defense know each other so that I can pick up the phone. And in my new role, I probably will be on the phone to the Turkish and the Greek chief of defense regularly because of the fact that they have this argument for a longer time already. But they haven't fought with each other because of the fact that they are in NATO. So that is the good news. The bad news is that Turkey is not always very helpful at the moment. But so far, there hasn't been a war between them because they are both members of NATO. So it is not always easy, but I think international cooperation is the way to go. I think we need to buy more the same capabilities, the same stuff, instead of buying them all nationally. I think that's one of the things that we can improve on. But there's all, I mean, apart from the military cooperation, there's also then the national interest in terms of industrial interests. To give you an example, 8 years ago, I was the director of plans, and I talked to my German colleague, and we agreed basically on building the same type of frigate. Build some in the Netherlands, build some in Germany, but the same with the same capabilities to lower the costs and to. And we agreed. So, and then the then chiefs of defense, yeah, they said that's a good idea. And then the ministers of defense said, yeah, that's a good idea. And we were almost going down that lane. And then the industry went to Bundeskanzler Merkel and killed it because of the German industrial interest. So there's more than just defense. There's always multiple interests where you have to deal with. I don't know, it's a satisfactory answer, but that's part of a very broad question you had. Thank you again for the coffee. It was you, wasn't it? You have to help me again with the question. What was?
I'll say it again. Yeah, my question was about the role of the military in Corona times. So,
Yeah.
please.
Okay. The interesting thing in the beginning was that the place where we actually were helping was because of the fact that there was because of the huge change in the situation as a result of COVID. For example, in the hospital, everybody walks on a very thin line when it comes to you know, if you want to do the job in accordance with all the rules and regulations in a hospital, you walk on a very thin line. It's rules and regulations from, I mean, medical rules and regulations, from the different professional groups like the surgeons and the anesthesiologists and they all have different rules, so that they have to work in accordance with all those rules. Then there is the Ministry of Healthcare. Then there is, of course, the different organizations that check whether things are being done correctly. The toezichthouders, I don't know what you call them, but supervisors. Well, the toezichthouders. Your English, so I'm sorry. And then so if things change so dramatically as with COVID, they basically were not able to walk on that very thin line. And they were basically standing here, and they should have been standing there, but they were standing here. And they said, I don't know, we don't know how to do this. And then we came in, and we are used that there is no line. If you are in Mali in the beginning, there is nothing. You're in the desert, and you start from nothing. There is no, I mean, there is chaos. That's most of the nations where we are, there is chaos. Whether it is the government, rebellion groups, whether it is a humanitarian disaster, whether it's an earthquake, we are always there when there is chaos. So we thrive on chaos, and we are able to organize things in chaos. In the beginning, in Tilburg, in the hospital, there were too many patients in ICU, and they were like, oh my God, there's too many patients in ICU. So there, two guys from us, two officers came in and said, where's the phone book of all the hospitals in the Netherlands? Here. And so two patients, yeah, two patients, picked up the phone, made a phone call to the first hospital in the phone book. And after 3 phone calls, they had a hospital where there was 1 ICU bed available. Okay, stand by. Do you have a phone book of ambulances? Yeah, okay. So they started a call for an ambulance that can transport a COVID patient. It's a different ambulance than a normal ambulance. And so they phoned them and said, okay, this is Tilburg, Groningen, 2.5 hours drive. So what time? 5 o'clock? Okay, so 2:30. Can you be here 2:30? Yeah, okay. Patient 1 is arranged. It was that simple. It was relatively simple, but it was starting to do things in chaos. And then we went to Rotterdam and we started to organize that more on a larger scale to basically find out where are ICU beds, where's too many patients, is there transport. But funny enough, I mean, in the Netherlands, I learned that in the Netherlands, the hospitals are little companies nowadays. And they are not only looking at healthcare, they are looking at earning money. So we found out that there were things in that system that were not necessarily, I will be careful to say this, but that were not necessarily focused on healthcare alone. And so the way we have organized healthcare in the Netherlands, which is the result of political debate, is what it is. But it doesn't allow the Ministry of Healthcare to say to a hospital, you do this. Then the hospital says, you're not my boss. I talk for money to the insurance companies, and I'm the one who decides what, who my patient is. So it is a complete different organization than the army or the armed forces, where I am indeed the boss when it comes to operations. The police isn't even that. The national police isn't even that. Because we've organized ourselves in the Netherlands with 26 security regions where the police and the public prosecutor and the mayor are in charge of the security of that particular region. And there's very little situations where there is a national crisis so that, for example, the Prime Minister can say, we're going to do this and that. So we have decentralized many things in the Netherlands in a way that are not helpful in a pandemic. So we were able, during that pandemic, to help where people were unable to see a solution. And once we helped them towards the first sort of changes, they started to do things themselves, and then we went away again. We shouldn't stay. We shouldn't take over jobs that can be done by civilian society. We have trucks, we can transport things. I mean, there's a lot of unemployed drivers. There's a lot of companies that need more work. So actually, yeah, you can drive things if it is truly a crisis. Like they did in Italy. The army helped to transport bodies, dead people, because of the COVID crisis there. Then it's probably good to have the army doing that. But there's a lot of things that can be done by civil society. But we basically help to organize and create to bring a chaotic situation to something that they could basically help themselves when we had created the oversight in the beginning. And that's basically what we do again. Now there's the snelteststraten, the test sites where you are going to be helped very quickly and with a quick result. There's like 20 of those planned in the Netherlands, and they needed in the beginning 1,000 people to man them. Now there's only one organization in the Netherlands that can do that. We can bring up from 0 to 1,000 in 24 hours. Nobody can. So that sort of help is what we do. As we had 1,000 people in St. Martin after the hurricane, after 1.5 weeks. There's not a lot of organizations that have that sort of surging power to bring in a lot of extra people. But as soon as possible, we will leave the test sites and leave the manning of them to civilians that are being trained by Randstad at the moment. So it's a combination of helping out when truly nobody else can do it, but as short as possible. Okay?
Thank you. I need to be the bully in this whole structure and finish the discussion with these last words. I think it was it always amazes me how broad the issues are and also how intense the issues are that you can discuss when you discuss and listen to a military leader such as you. So thank you very much for that. But I will gladly give the floor to Annabelle to say the final words.
I'm going to take it off again. Yes, thank you so much for the inspiring words and the interesting conversation. I believe on behalf of everyone who was watching and everyone who was here, it was a really inspiring insight in your work and in the Ministry of Defense. So I would like to give one more big applause for and of course also Theo Rinkel, thank you for moderating this event. Now would be the time to shake hands, have a beer, shake hands, and hand out presents. But We have a really impersonal but really corona-proof present station over there. So I would like to ask you to
pick it up myself.
Yeah, basically. Logistical. One of each item would be. For now, we would like to provide you with the opportunity to leave first, if you want to. Of course, you are welcome to stay for the announcement of our Lustrum theme, which will be done by Josephine. And I would like to ask you to stay seated until we have announced the theme, and then afterwards, I wish you a really nice evening. And thanks again for being here.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay, everybody can stay seated for just one more few minutes. As you all know, this is also the opening of our 8th Lustrum year at the SPIL, of 88 Lustrum SPIL. So we have a small video which will be the announcement of the theme.
The United States will immediately impose additional punishing economic sanctions on the Iranian regime.
Het coronavirus houdt ons land in de greep.
Alle eet- en drinkgelegenheden in Nederland sluiten vanaf 6 uur vandaag de deuren.
Als je de beelden ziet, bijvoorbeeld van de overvolle stranden, de treinen zijn leeg, de kantoren zijn leeg. We blijven dus zoveel mogelijk binnen.